Senator Harris ended her own presidential bid back in December. So let's dig into her resume. Here are 3 things to know about her background in public office tonight. She served as San Francisco's district attorney from 2004 to 2011. She then became the first black woman to serve as California's attorney general. And in 2016, California voters sent her to the U.S. Senate. That's where she still serves today. Joining me are 11 Alive political analyst Dr. Andra Gillespie from Emory University and the Republican consultant and strategist Mike Hassinger. Now, the Trump campaign wasted no time with a new ad. Check it out.
Kamala Harris ran for president by rushing to the radical left, embracing Bernie's plan for socialized medicine, calling for trillions in new taxes, attacking Joe Biden for racist policies. Voters rejected Harris. They smartly spotted a phony. But not Joe Biden. He's not that smart.
Dr. Gillespie, as a political scientist, why is Senator Harris the best pick for Joe Biden given the circumstances? And the second part of this question is a simple one. Will it matter here in Georgia?
Well, and I think there are a number of questions there. So one of the reasons why she was chosen is that notion, that moniker of phony Kamala, I think might take a little bit harder to take root as opposed to crooked Hillary, little Marco, and some of the other epithets that the Trump campaign has used against various candidates over the years. And I think that that was part of the reason why Joe Biden chose her as his running mate. Some of the other potential nominees had liabilities that were far greater than Senator Harris's liabilities. I mean, she does have an issue with members of the progressive left in terms of her experience as a prosecutor. That's probably more easily overcome than, say, Susan Rice's connection to Benghazi or Karen Bass's praise of Fidel Castro. So I think, this we'll have to wait and see whether or not this actually resonates, but it does kind of look like it's grasping at straws. And the choice of a former prosecutor who's held statewide office really does put Biden in the driver's seat at being able to sort of mitigate some of the attacks that the Trump campaign has actually levied against him so far in this campaign.
And Mike, what about this pick? Do Republicans what do they see here? What do they fear?
The unified Democratic coalition on the progressive wing sort of tolerating a prosecutor and a solid and unified African-American voting bloc that is looking past Senator Harris's past transgressions, and they're really afraid that Senator Harris will appeal to that long sought-after demographic called suburban women. Does she bring white women into the Democrat fold? Well, she might, and that's sort of the big question mark. The standard playbooks, the scripts for the anti-Harris Biden ads have already been written. They're airing now, as you just showed. And it was sort of a very easy prediction to see that the Trump campaign is going to, like I said, light into her hammer and tongs and kitchen sink. They're just, that's their playbook, and it wouldn't really have mattered who Biden picked as his running mate.
Mike Hassinger and Dr. Andra Gillespie, thank you very much. We appreciate your
Thank you.
insight and your observations tonight.